Phyllis here from southernfrugal.com. This morning I'm going to fix a chuck roast, and this is going to be a chuck roast different than any I've ever fixed before. Not that it's a fancy recipe, but the beef is different, and I wanted to show you this. About 2 weeks ago I found this at Bilo. No hormones, no steroids. Now I paid for it, okay? And this was like what, $13.24 for 2.21 pounds of chuck roast. Now this is Angus beef, and I did freeze it. So it's been almost about 2 weeks now. Let me let you see that price. That's pretty much, and it certainly wasn't on sale, but I saw this little tag on it and I really just had to try it. Okay, so all I'm going to do is brown this meat. I'm not rolling it in flour or anything like that. And then I'm just going to use a simple teriyaki sauce with it as I'm cooking it. I'm going to be cooking it in the oven. All right, so let's take a look here now. See, it's got a lot of marbling in it. Alright, so I've got my pan heating up. I'm going to put just a little bit of Crisco oil in it. Maybe a couple of tablespoons. And just turn the skillet all around. And now I'm just going to dry this off with a paper towel. And it's still just a little bit frozen. Now, I do not wash my meat because really when you're washing it, you're just spreading germs all in your sink and everywhere. So I do try not to touch it. Alright, so I'm ready to put it right down on the skillet. Let you see that. And I've got my burner on medium-high because I want it to get a good brown on it to give it a good flavor. But I also don't want this splashing all over my cooktop, so I'm going to use my splatter screen. And I'm going to put a paper towel over that, leaving just a little bit of an area so the steam can escape. But see, you can already see how much is coming through this little screen. Anyway, we're going to brown this at a pretty high heat, and it's not rolled in flour, so it's going to be popping and cracking a lot, but we want a good brown color on it. Actually, I'm going to turn that burner down a little bit because it's popping too much. Alright. So this particular meat, it sort of reminds me of the chicken, and I did a video on the chicken that didn't have any hormones and was fed all natural stuff, and that's really the case with this beef. And I've never tried it before, so I'm going to see, if it tastes good, really. And I don't see why it wouldn't. Now I know that this company also, I think, does pork. I didn't see any in Bilo, so, I don't know where to find that. But I did look them up on the internet, and they have a whole big website about how their meat is natural, and I guess they're humane and whatever. But they do not feed any hormones or any antibiotics, so that was good news. So after this browns on this side, I'm going to turn it over and we'll brown it on the other side, and then I'll show you how I fix this. Okay, we are back, and this meat is pretty well browned. Now I wanted to show you this. A lot of this on this paper towel, I don't know if you can see it or not, is grease. And some of it is just steam. But it prevents a lot of those spatters on the stove. Now, you still get some, but you won't get as many. Alright, first thing I'm going to do is pour off as much of this grease as I can get off of this meat. Now a little tip on browning meat and so it won't really stick to the bottom of the pan. If you just take your pan off the heat and let it cool just a little bit. Or another thing you can do is sit it down on just a wet, cool rag. Let me show you. Like this. And usually it'll come right up from the bottom. Now this is the Gordon Ramsay cookware, and I really like it because the handle is metal. You can put all this in the oven. And that's what we're going to do with this. Now, I've thoroughly browned it on both sides. See how it comes up? Get a good brown on it if you want that really great taste of the beef. Alright, so I've got a cup and a half of just regular tap water. And I'm going to put 2 or 3 tablespoons of just regular teriyaki sauce. Now this is not the soy sauce, it's teriyaki, which has a little bit of rice wine in it. So maybe 2-3 tablespoons in there. I've already cut my burner off because this is getting ready to go in the oven. So I'm just going to dump this over it. There you go. Now I'm going to bake this in the oven, 350 degrees for 2 hours, maybe longer, just until it gets tender. And I'll put the lid on it. Of course, that saves you from having to use any kind of aluminum foil. And I do have a link for this Gordon Ramsay cookware on the Meals and Fixins page of my website. But anyway, we're going to have this for lunch along with rice, some green beans from the garden, and probably sliced tomatoes. So, there it is. Put it in the oven. Forget it. You don't have to worry. Now, I wanted to share a little something with you that I learned several years ago. I used to cook chuck roast or whatever in the crock pot. And I was reading on the internet several years ago about how to know what different appliances and all in your home cost to run, what they cost on your electric bill. So I spent a couple of days doing all the math and checking the back of the appliance for what wattage it used, and then determining how long I used it. And one of the most expensive things to use in your home is your crock pot. I know that it's very hard to believe. And I just could not believe it. I really couldn't. But I went ahead and did the math, and sure enough, it cost a lot. Because if you were fixing something overnight, even though it's not using much wattage, it's just going into a regular plug-in, and you know your oven is a 220 wire, this is a 110 wire. How could that possibly be? Well, here's the way. Your oven, most ovens now have 2.5, some even 3 inches of insulation. The door's very tight. It's a double door, and so we're going to like put this in at 350 degrees. The oven will cycle on until it gets to 350, and then it cuts off. It doesn't run the whole time. In fact, it runs very little of the time based on the insulation in the oven. So it was true. So guess what? My crock pot went back in the cabinet, and I started using my oven more. Now, the crock pot, the whole thing with it is, first of all, it's not insulated. Even though it's a ceramic little bowl usually in it, it's just not insulated. So the whole time, pretty much, the heat is on. So if you're cooking it all night long, you're using more electricity than you would cooking it in your regular oven for 2, maybe 3 hours. So that's something to think about, because the crock pot does have to bring it up to a certain temperature in order to even cook. So that was a surprise, and I'll tell you another surprise was the little toaster oven. I mean, I thought that cost nothing to run, right? But it does. because the toaster oven has no insulation whatsoever, none. So of course I don't really cook anything for very long in my toaster oven, but I did before. So now I just simply don't do that. I just go ahead and cut the big oven on. If I'm going to cook something for say an hour, I go ahead and cut the big oven on, and I've paid attention to it, and they were right. It cycles off, and as long as you don't open the door, it kind of maintains that temperature for a pretty long time. Anyway, that was my little spill on that. So don't be fooled thinking your crock pot's saving you money, because it's really not. Now, it will save you time, but not money, okay? All right, so we're ready to put this in the oven, 350 degrees. Let you look at the little brown gravy on it. And part of that brown color is coming from browning the meat, and part of it is coming from the teriyaki sauce. All right, so when this gets done, we'll be back and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, the chuck roast actually ended up cooking for about 2.5 hours. There's what it looks like. Now with the Gordon Ramsay cookware, see all that stuff on the lid? All you have to do is soak it about 5 minutes and it just comes out clean as can be. Alright, so now we want to just see if this is tender. And it is. It's absolutely fork tender. And I did taste of one little side of it a while ago, and it is absolutely delicious. Let's do this little bit right here. It's super tender and has a great taste. Now I'm going to make some gravy to go with this from all this brown in the pan. 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. In a little bowl with some cold water. And just mix that up until it's dissolved. It'll look just like milk. Just mix it up until it's dissolved so there are no lumps in it, which wouldn't take but just a few seconds. Alright. Now I am going to pour this liquid from the pan into another pot to make the gravy. I'm going to hope I can hold everything in the pan when I do that. I'm going to leave just a little bit of that juice in the pan. Alright, let me turn that down so you can see. Alright, there's the liquid for my gravy. I'm just going to go ahead and turn this on high. Put my little thickener in. Now once this gravy starts to boil and turns clear, then it'll be ready. And I might need to add a little more water to it. I'm not sure. I'll have to wait until it thickens up a bit before I know, but it wouldn't be but just a few minutes. Now we are just about ready to eat. And I'm going to go ahead and cut up this chuck roast. And of course there's no slicing it with a knife because it's just going to fall apart, so I just use scissors and cut it into small little serving pieces. And I try to cut some of that fat off while I'm doing that, because nobody's going to eat the fat for sure. So just take that fat out and discard it. Scoot that over to one side here so everybody knows that's the fat. We don't need to be eating that. And I'm going to cut this big section up. Okay, but before I do that, I see that our gravy's already boiling. Now I want to know if, is it going to be too thick or not thick enough? Just stir it. So that looks about right. So it would be about 2 tablespoons of cornstarch per about 2 cups of water. See the thickness of it? So it's already clear. The milky color now is turned clear. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that burner off now. I put no more seasoning in it. The only seasoning that went into either the roast or the gravy was simply the 2 to 3 tablespoons of teriyaki. And now teriyaki does have a rice wine in it. And I really think that's probably what makes it so good. Anyway, I'm going to take that fat away. Chuck roasts are pretty heavily laced with the fat, but they have a really great taste. Now, I'm going to have to give a thumbs up to this roast because it is delicious, and knowing that the cattle are fed, with no added hormones or steroids or anything, that really makes a big difference for me. Now, I love beef, but I don't like the idea of it having all the steroids and antibiotics and all that in it. So there's a closer look at it. And it is very, very tender and very tasty. And I think this is a trend we're seeing. I think you're going to see a lot more companies start having their beef this way and more controlled on what the beef are eating and staying away from the steroids and the hormones. And just like the chicken, I think I did a video on that a couple of weeks ago where I fixed the chicken and dumplings. It was Fairdale chicken, and they are also very strict on the way they feed and raise those chickens, and it really shows in the way it tastes. And I can already tell you this is absolutely delicious, and it's just really fork tender. So I'm going to call this Always Tender Chuck Roast, okay? And it's very much like the way that I fix the cube steak by putting it in the oven. And of course this is the Gordon Ramsay cookware, which will have that lid, and this is where I'm cooking my string beans. So every lid has this little opening for the steam to escape, and that just works super in the oven. When I used to fix chuck roast, I used to wrap them in tin foil and all that. You don't need to do any of that with this cookware. So we're having the chuck roast with the gravy, some green beans from the garden, some jasmine rice, and I'll tell you that when I fix the jasmine rice this way, I do put butter in it. After it's all cooked, I usually put a couple of tablespoons of butter in it, just because I like it that way. And so we're also having some sliced tomatoes from the garden. So we're going to plate this up, and I'll show you what it looks like. Be back in just a minute. Okay, I've got this all plated up for our lunch today, and all I've got to do is put some gravy on this rice right down the middle of it, and a little gravy on the meat. Just move over here, and again some gravy on the rice. Some gravy on the meat. And again, no additional seasonings were used in this, just the teriyaki sauce. Alright, we're ready to eat. We've got our iced tea all fixed, so we will see you next time. I hope you'll try this kind of meat. I will leave the name of it down in the description, and maybe you might want to try it if you can find it in your grocery store. So we're having the chuck roast. It's very tender. Rice, that's jasmine rice with the gravy. Green beans from the garden. And of course some tomatoes from the garden. Now I didn't fix any bread because we're having the rice, so we don't really need the bread. Alright, see you next time.